heart of Nice, a notorious thief orchestrated an audacious $20 million heist, vanishing without a trace through the city's sewers, leaving behind only a taunting message: without weapons, without violence, without hate.
The morning of July 19, 1976 started like any other in the French city of Nice. The citizens had just enjoyed a relaxing 3-day weekend for the national holiday of Bastille Day. However, for customers of the Société Générale Bank on Avenue Jean Médecin, it was quickly becoming clear that something was very wrong. Just a few minutes before 9 a.m., the officers at the bank went to open the main vault and release the money for transactions. The vault that contained millions of francs was considered highly impenetrable. Along with millions in cash, it also contained 4,000 lockboxes containing gold and other expensive jewelry. But the ATM outside the bank refused to dispense cash, and when customers began arriving early Monday morning, they were told by the flustered staff that the bank vault could not be accessed. The outer door had been opened, but the inner door appeared stuck. At first, the employees thought the door was merely stuck, which isn't highly uncommon as the door was 75 years old and weighed more than 20 tons. Before this incident, the door opened very easily once a few drops of oil were applied on it, but that wasn't the case this time. By 10 a.m., specialists from safe manufacturer Cachet Bausch had arrived to sort out the problem. They tried to figure out the issue with the lock mechanism, but it quickly seemed obvious that the lock was working fine. After 2 hours of work, the vault doors stubbornly refused to budge. By this time, the customers who had been waiting since the morning to retrieve their cash and valuables had now gotten increasingly frustrated. They began to question the security of the Société Générale Bank and were starting to worry. They were left feeling vulnerable and concerned about the security of their valuables. At noon, the decision was made to break through the walls of the vault and fix the door from the inside. Around 3 p.m., the jackhammers finally broke through, and a workman peered through the hole. What he saw made his jaw drop. The interior of the vault was in shambles. Hundreds of safety deposit boxes had been broken open and ransacked, covering the floor in a 6-inch layer of cash, checks, bearer bonds, stock certificates, wills, and deeds. There were papers and documents littering the floor of the vault. Amongst this mess was the equipment used by the robbers to break into the vault. An impenetrable vault had been opened without any visible external opening. But how? The police were completely dumbstruck. On the wall, spray-painted in giant letters, they found a message: without weapons, without violence, without hate. Nice had just been struck by the most audacious and stylish heist in French history. Within minutes of the crime being discovered, the Société Générale was crawling with nearly every police inspector in the city. Fearing the thieves might be holed up in one of the vault's 3 chambers, the police assigned Detective Pierre Lecroix, the smallest man on the site, to crawl into the vault to investigate. The hole was so tight that Lecroix was forced to remove his trousers to fit through, later noting as he swept through the vault that it's hard to feel brave in your underwear. But the thieves were long gone, having escaped down a tunnel after welding the vault door shut from the inside. After the doors were opened and more officers entered the vault, it became increasingly clear just how brazen and sophisticated a crime they were dealing with. Police found portable stoves, dirty dishes, and even a makeshift bed, indicating that the thieves had spent several hours inside the vault. It seemed apparent that the thieves had entered by digging a hole via a 30-foot tunnel. This tunnel led to the city's sewage system. Through initial investigation, police believed that this was definitely not the work of a single man, hence they had their eyes set on a gang of thieves. The police investigation was extensive, with officers scouring the city for any clues. They found a few scraps of fabric caught in the vault's ventilation system, which they believed belonged to the thieves. They also discovered a small notebook with some cryptic notes. which they hoped might lead them to the mastermind behind the heist. They also found half a mile of electrical cable alongside waterproof flashlights that had been used during the digging of the tunnel. As the news of the heist spread, the people of Niš were shocked and amazed. Many were left wondering how such a daring and sophisticated crime could have occurred in their city. It took 12 detectives a total of 4 days to catalog the contents of the vault, but they didn't even find a single print that could point towards the culprits. They began to suspect whether it was an inside job. Officers even began interviewing some of the former employees, trying to find out if they had any hand in the robbery. Police officers were tracking the equipment, trying to find some clues regarding the culprits. The bank decided to offer a $250,000 reward for any information regarding the culprits of the bank robbery. At that time, it was reported as the biggest bank robbery in history.
I think the principal emotion of the detectives at this time was rage at the people who were laughing at the crime, laughing and applauding at the crime, who went around talking to each other and instead of saying hello and goodbye, they would say, without arms, without violence, without hatred.
In the days and weeks that followed, the police scoured the city of Niš and the surrounding area, searching for any leads that could point them towards the perpetrators. They interviewed countless witnesses, checked local hotels and motels, and even searched the city's sewer system, but to no avail. The thieves had seemingly vanished into thin air. Just when the case seemed to have reached a dead end, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The Gendarmerie, the French National Police Force, received an anonymous tip about a supposedly empty villa located about 15 miles outside of Niš. Officers were dispatched to investigate, and upon arrival, they encountered a group of individuals who claimed to be renting the property from its regular owner. The police were initially satisfied with these explanations, but something about the situation didn't sit right with them. They decided to return to the villa a few days later, this time with a more thorough search in mind. It was then that they made a startling discovery. The villa's basement was a sophisticated command center for the robbery, complete with maps, plans, and other incriminating evidence. Further investigation revealed that the villa's occupants were the masterminds behind the Société Générale heist. The leader of the group was a man named Albert Spaggiari, a town photographer with a shady past and a penchant for daring criminal exploits. He shared the villa with his wife Audie, who he was very loyal to. Albert Spaggiari was born on December 14, 1932, in L'Orange-Montagne, Haute-Alpes. He grew up in Hyères, where his mother ran a lingerie store. At 19, he enlisted as a paratrooper in the First Indochina War and later joined the Organisation Armée Secrète, or OAS, a right-wing group opposing Algerian independence. This led to his imprisonment for political terrorism. During his adult life, he began working as a photographer and owned a photographic studio in Niš. Spaggiari had been the driving force behind the robbery, using his knowledge of the city's sewer system to plan and execute the heist. He had recruited a team of skilled accomplices, including a safecracker and a locksmith, to help him carry out the operation. The police also discovered that Spaggiari and his team had used the villa's basement as a staging ground, where they had spent weeks digging a tunnel from the sewer system to the Société Générale's bank vault. This explained how the thieves had been able to access the vault without being detected. And hence, the gang's name was dubbed the Sewer Rats. With the incriminating evidence in hand, the police were able to piece together the full scope of the robbery and identify the key players involved. Albert was on a trip to the Far East accompanying the mayor of Niš as a photographer and was arrested when the returning plane touched down. The rest of his accomplices were also apprehended, and the authorities set about the task of piecing together the key events of the heist. Albert narrated the entire story of how he masterfully executed the bank heist. He entailed that the idea came to him about 2 years ago and was sparked by his neighbor. His neighbor who worked at the bank let it slip that the vault had no alarm. Spaggiari first checked the bank security by renting a safety deposit box and planting a loud alarm clock inside. This ensured that there was no sound alarms or seismic detection gear that could detect the tunneling activity. He took photos of the interior of the vault and made extensive notes about it. He realized that it would take many hours to break into the thousands of locked boxes. He needed to find a way he could break in while being undetected by authorities. Just then, an idea popped into his head: the sewage system. Would you believe he actually went down inside the sewage system, ensuring the unbearable stench and the dirty rats just to find the sewer line that led to the bank? All the while, he smoked a cigar to undermine the door. He then faked his identity as a contractor and went to the city hall to get a map of Niche's sewer system. Ultimately, he found the sewer bridge that was closest to the bank, but it was still 30 feet from the bank's vaults. He also gathered information about the bank's security measures and the location of the vault. He used a combination of surveillance and interviews with bank employees to piece together the layout of the bank and the location of the vault. Finally, Albert had completed the required research. But what about the 30-foot distance between the sewer line and the bank? He didn't have the means to tunnel through that. So he contacted professional gangsters from Marseille who examined the plans and the site. However, they decided not to participate in the heist. After the Marseille gangsters declined, Spaggiari recruited his accomplices through his old connections from the right-wing paramilitary group OAS, which he had been involved with in the past. Spaggiari assembled a team of trusted associates, many of whom were experienced criminals, to carry out the heist. This suggests that Spaggiari carefully selected his accomplices based on their skills and loyalty. Some of the gang members were engineers and some were electricians, so he carefully chose accomplices who could maintain secrecy and discretion. Once they had done enough research on the bank's layout, the team began planning the heist. They spent several days creating a detailed plan, including the route they would take through the sewer system, the tools they would need, and the timing of the heist. The execution of the plan was a complex and intricate process. The team used a combination of tools and devices, including a tunneling machine, a safecracker, and a locksmith to access the vault. They spent several hours digging the tunnel, using a combination of manual labor and machinery to create a path through the sewer system. 26 cylinders of acetylene, as found on the crime scene, had been used to fuel blowtorches as well as equipment for ventilation to bring fresh air to the workers. They worked long hours, taking precautions to avoid detection by not drinking coffee or alcohol, and getting at least 10 hours of sleep every shift. They used rubber rafts and installed hundreds of meters of electrical cables for lighting. The gang set up picnic tables for meals and air mattresses for sleeping. They completed most of the digging throughout the months of May and June. While sewer rats were digging their way through the tunnels, Albert remained on the lookout. The entire team had radios through which they could be warned to escape the tunnels if they were at any risk of being caught. But the tunnel was very tight and suffocating. One of the diggers even passed out from suffocation. So Albert came up with a new plan. He divided the gang into 3 teams. Each team would only work once in 3 days, meaning they get 2 days of rest before their next shift. They would dig for 10 minutes and rest for the next 10. He also provided an on-site doctor for the welfare of his accomplices. Half a mile of electrical cable was used to provide electricity in the tunnel. This provided ventilation and lights for the tunnel diggers. They reached the wall of the vault by the first week of July, but the vault was lined with 12 inches of concrete, which is still a huge task. But after a few days of drilling, they accomplished this as well. At 2 a.m. on Sunday, they finally reached the vault. The team used the safecracker to open the safe and the locksmith to disable the alarm system. They spent several hours removing the valuables from the vault, using a combination of bags and containers to carry the loot. They broke into 400 of the total 4,000 boxes. That night, they had a whole dinner inside that vault. They even used the gold plates as dishes. In total, they spent 27 hours inside the vault. At 5 a.m. on Monday, Albert decided that it was time for the gang to pack up their bags and leave since the bank would open at 9 a.m. The getaway was a well-planned and executed part of the heist, as it was the most important. The team used a combination of cars and motorcycles to escape the scene, with several members of the team using disguises and fake identities to avoid detection. In the end, the heist was a success, with the team making off with an estimated 30 to 70 million francs in cash and valuables. The team's plan was meticulous and well executed, with every detail carefully planned and executed to ensure their success. The audacity and sophistication of the heist left the authorities and public in awe. The robbery, later dubbed the heist of the century, would go on to inspire numerous books, films, and documentaries, cementing its place as one of the most legendary bank robberies in history. While narrating the important details of his heist, Albert would meet the judge in his chambers every Thursday to corroborate the evidence. The authorities were also amazed by this level of his cooperation, but Albert knew that his cooperation would only get him a slightly lenient sentence, and he did not want to go to prison. He knew he needed a plan to avoid being taken away by the authorities. Spaggiari, a cunning and resourceful individual, had devised a daring escape plan that would leave anyone stunned. It all began when Spaggiari was called to meet with Judge Richard Boises in his chambers. The judge had been reviewing the evidence presented during the trial, and he wanted to discuss some points with Spaggiari. Unbeknownst to the judge, Spaggiari had planned this meeting to coincide with his escape. As Spaggiari entered the judge's chambers, he handed the judge a document that he claimed contained evidence pertinent to his case. The judge, intrigued by this document, began to read it. However, to his surprise, the document was written in an indecipherable code. The judge was so engrossed in deciphering the code that he failed to notice Spaggiari's subtle movements. Meanwhile, Spaggiari had arranged for a motorcycle to be waiting outside the courtroom window. He had also made sure that the window was left open, allowing him to jump out and land safely on the roof of a parked car. This was a crucial part of his plan, as it would give him the necessary distance to jump onto the motorcycle. With the judge distracted by the coded document, Spaggiari saw his chance. He jumped out the window, landed safely on the roof of the car. He then leapt onto the waiting motorcycle, which was driven by an accomplice. As he sped away, he shouted au revoir to the stunned judge, leaving everyone in the courtroom in awe. This was a masterclass in escaping from the clutches of the police. Albert had anticipated every possible scenario, from the judge's reaction to the security measures in place. His training as a paratrooper had also helped him prepare for the physical demands of the escape. It is reported that later on, the owner of the car on which Spaggiari landed received a 5,000 franc check in the mail for the damage to his roof. Spaggiari spent the rest of his days drifting between South America and Europe, living in hiding and evading capture. He was believed to have returned to France occasionally to see his wife Audie. When he died of lung cancer in 1989, he had been living in Italy under a false name for several years. Some reports also claim he got plastic surgery to evade capture, but many of these accounts are probably fictitious. Spaggiari's daring heist and subsequent escape have become legendary in French criminal history. His story has been immortalized in books and films, including the 2008 French biopic Sans Armes, Ni Haine, Ni Violence, which portrayed him as a part comic fantasist and part daring thief.